It's great to see so many people here this afternoon in this wonderful church. I also wanted to really thank Rama, Darakshan, Noor, and Maha, who really put this together. And I have known Darakshan especially for quite some time now, and I think to have local Muslim women organizers who are able to get communities from different backgrounds involved in this way is a real testament and asset, and I'll talk about it a little bit later because that was not the case actually when NCERS or special registration hit this area. So I just want to just give a shout out and hope you'll join me in a round of applause for the four of them. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of time, and Darakshan, you should feel free to cut me off when you need to talk a little bit about the history, as Rama said, of special registration. And the reason that I was asked to do this is primarily because I was in Washington, D.C. when the special registration program happened in 2003 and worked with local communities here in the South Asian Muslim communities in particular to deal with the impact of it. So it's a little bit of that historic institutional knowledge that I hope to provide so that we understand what the impact is of that particular program and the broader context of criminalization, and then lastly to prepare for what's ahead. So I want to start off with just telling you a little bit about the timing of special registration, which again, as we know, happened in 2003. But what is really important to remember is that during that time, we were definitely in a post 9/11 moment, right? In the weeks and months right after 9/11, Muslim, Arab, South Asian, Sikh communities witnessed an unprecedented backlash of hate violence, airport profiling, school bullying, employment discrimination, and on and on. The likes of which we have not seen, except actually in the last couple of months with this particular leading up to the election and post-election. At the same time, we also began to see before 2003 several initiatives that were put into place by the Bush administration that pretty much escaped the public radar, escaped attention by the media even. So programs like, and I don't know, can you raise your hands if you've heard of any of these? The Alien Responder Initiative, maybe some of you have. We watched as people were practically picked off of street corners. Yeah. Yeah, I can try to adjust.
Better without the mic or with the mic? With the mic? He said
Hi. Good to see you. Okay, can I try this? Is this okay? Okay, I'm gonna try it. If it's really bad, just let Darakshan know and we'll figure something out. Okay, so there were a number of pieces of policies and practices that were already in place by the time special registration hit our communities. So these sorts of programs, which essentially ended up detaining, interrogating, and deporting people that community activists called it disappeared, because we did not know what happened to these individuals. They were essentially picked up from their small businesses, their homes, and their workplaces. We also saw closed immigration hearings, indefinite detentions, if there was a national security reason. So you already had a practice of the violation of due process rights for communities, all under this umbrella of national security. So that is what was already happening by the time we actually ended up with special registration. And of course, the Patriot Act had already been passed. And I think it's important to remember that because the context now might look a little bit different than the context 15 years ago. But the bottom line is that we have already been seeing a lot of these violations, obviously, over the course of the last decade and a half. So I wanted to talk a little bit about who special registration affected. You've probably heard that it affected people from particular countries in Africa, Arab countries, the Middle East, and South Asia. And the program basically required males aged 16 years and older who were not US citizens and not green card holders. So we're basically talking about people who are here on temporary visas, like international students, tourists, people who might have been visitors to the country, right, who all intended to go back home. That's who the program impacted and affected. So if you were holding one of those visas, and if you were a male, 16 years and older, you were required to report to your local immigration authority. At the time, the immigration office was still called INS, and it was under the Department of Justice. It had not actually moved over to the Department of Homeland Security, where it exists now. And this is how these groups were basically called for in these different categories. The countries of origin were listed in this way. The problem was that the information about special registration actually was released in the Federal Register. Not a lot of people read the Federal Register, as you know. In fact, I found out about special registration, I think it was like page 4 of the Washington Post. And that's when I found out that it was actually happening. And obviously community members didn't know about it either. So really quickly on why special registration was put into place according to the federal government. Very clearly they said it's because of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and the government needed to know and monitor who was in this country from particular nations around the world where there could be terrorist activity going on or an incitement of terrorist activity here in the United States, and that they had to preserve their borders. So this was another example, and Sears was another example of the conflation of immigration law and national security laws, right? And national security being the justification for pretty much profiling people on the basis of their nationality and their faith. So the reaction to special registration. So as I said earlier, there was very limited mainstream media coverage of this program. It really actually, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, became the role of community activists and community documentarians and storytellers to understand what special registration meant and to convey that to the American public. Secondly, when it came to organizations, the landscape of organizations at the time that this happened in 2003 looks radically different than it does now. So at the national level, there were not as many organizations that we see now. In fact, the organization that I led for 10 years, SALT, did not exist in 2003. And there were many others like that that did not fully exist. Local organizing differed. So in places like New York City and Los Angeles, we actually did see a lot of responses from South Asian, Muslim, and Arab communities in the form of rallies and vigils and know your rights clinics and the like. But I can tell you that here in the DC area, there was very little organizing in terms of outreach to communities, in terms of doing know your rights clinics, in terms of translating the information about what NCERS required into particular languages that our communities needed. There was very little because there was not enough infrastructure, and I think we'll talk about this later. It is radically different now, thankfully, in many ways. The other ways that communities responded, clearly there was a legal element to this, right? And so the American Immigration Lawyers Association, or AILA, for example, did a tremendous job in organizing and educating immigration lawyers to represent people who had to basically present themselves for special registration. Although many lawyers actually did not know what would happen to their clients, there was a big issue as to whether to even counsel your clients to register or not, right? And that became something that I think we're going to see again this time around, whether one should even go, right? And then lastly, within the affected communities, there was a tremendous amount of fear, confusion, and panic. People, I remember coordinating a Know Your Rights clinic at a mosque in Silver Spring when special registration was ongoing, and the mosque was filled with people who wanted to know what would happen to their brothers, their fathers, their husbands. And at the same time, people ask the same question over and over again. Questions like, I'm out of status, should I still do this? Or what will happen to me if I don't? And unfortunately, we had very few answers to questions like that, and we had to wait it out. I just wanted to show a couple of pictures of the types of responses that happen around the country. These are pictures from New York City, in terms of the South Asian community in particular, saying and standing up to saying no special registration. I also wanted to, at this point, show you a little clip of a film and where's Chris, who is going to help me with this? Thank you. I wanted to show you a little clip of a film because we're talking about the impact. I talked a little bit about what the program was, who it impacted, why it was put into place by the government, right, and about the impact. And I really think that this particular film, and I'm only going to show you maybe like 5 minutes of it, and I hope that you will actually go find it and watch it. It's called Whose Children Are These? And it is directed by South Asian filmmaker Teresa Tunjan in New York City. And it is one of the most, at least for me, emotionally evocative films about this time period, and it focuses on special registration in particular. So there are two stories we'll hear a little bit about. One is of a young woman named Navila, who is a Bangladeshi student in New York City, and about her father. And the second is about a young man named Mohammed, who is a Pakistani young man living in New York City. Yeah, that's where it starts.
Operation in the morning. We woke up at 5. I wanted to be there early and finish early and come back and then just get over it.